Addison Central School District Board meeting to order. The current time is 6:30. I have six.
Yep.
Yes, it just changed. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to go around and do introductions. Matt, could you start us?
Matt Carenti, Director of Finance and Operations.
Helen Whelan-Wiest.
Chip Malcolm.
Mary Heather Noble.
Jamie McCallum.
Trisha Allen.
Wendy Baker.
Barbara Wilson.
Jason Chance.
Brian Bauer.
Malva Glickman. Sophia Locke.
Suzanne Buck.
Steve Orzek.
Joanna Doria.
And is either Ellie or Laura on?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, excellent. So I had sent an email out this afternoon, and we had a technical glitch over the weekend with the agenda, and part of the statute, if you have a website as a district that within 48 hours of the meeting, you are to post the agenda on the website. And it didn't happen.
Agenda was posted, didn't publish.
It didn't publish on the website. So all the steps were taken, and for some reason there was a glitch and it didn't show up on the website. So what we checked with legal counsel and thought it best to really err on the side of, just being careful. So at tonight's meeting, we're not going to take actions on specific items, but we can have discussion, right? And so if you happen to see my email this afternoon, I've asked folks for their availability, hopefully next Monday, like at 6:30, where the sole purpose of the meeting would be just to really take the actions that we wanted to take tonight. So the good news is, we can have discussion regarding all of the items that were on the agenda, but we won't be able to actually, take actions. So that includes, things even like meeting minutes, right? It's an action, so we won't be able to do that. Any questions about that?
So that's going to include personnel?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, yes. Anything that has action in front of it is something that, we can ask questions about it, that kind of thing. We just won't do the final approval or disapproval depending on what the vote would be. Does that work for everyone? So,
How do we keep that from happening again? I mean, this is,
right. Well, so
we're getting into this really
Right,
complicated
right.
world of,
technology and
technology.
things breaking and
Yes.
that kind of thing. I think what we need to make sure is that there's a step after the agenda has been posted that someone else goes in on another computer and checks, because you can have things in cache and everything might look well. And I did do that on Sunday.
It's fine, I just
Yeah,
wanna,
but unfortunately it was already too
I don't
late.
remember anything that,
Yeah.
like this has happened before.
Yeah,
So we were in touch with the website provider because the policy committee minutes were posted at the same time. And there's an electronic tracker that shows that everything was posted. Policy was published shortly after that, and board was not. So we said, well, how does this happen? And their explanation is that sometimes it takes a little longer. I mean, it wasn't anything that was particularly helpful. So in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll try and post a day earlier, and we'll ensure that somebody else in the office from a different computer is backing up and checking that. I mean, it has never happened before in anybody's memory. So we're not sure of the likelihood of the problem on the website provider's end being solved, but we've put now 2 fail-safes in place, and hopefully that will prevent the unanticipated from being unanticipated again.
right.
It's easy on this one, because these aren't things that have to happen, but
Right.
if we have something we have to vote on
Yep.
Right.
by very close timing, then it becomes a real issue, so.
And we've taken it for granted that once you've got it up there.
I'm not blaming you, I'm
it
just
shows
Yeah.
that it's
making sure that we
Yeah,
have
no, I agree.
fail-safe type.
Believe me, I agree. Definitely. So, though it's an action, I think we can go through the motion to adopt the agenda as I modified it, to remove the agenda. So first I need a motion to adopt the agenda, and then I'll amend it to do it properly,
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
okay? And a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Joanna. And so then what I would like to do is provide a motion to amend the agenda, that we do not take action on approving the minutes, the bills, the appointments, the Ripton K-12 grade configuration, class size and attendance boundaries, and policy C9.
And did you have personnel in there?
I had appointments.
Okay.
Yeah,
Second. Can I add another adjustment?
sure.
Can Communications Engagement Committee address the board?
Sure.
Report of the committee?
Sure. And Joanna, did you do the second on that one as well?
She did.
Yeah, okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. So, at this point, I would, we can go back to the original motion that we would approve the agenda as modified. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent, thank you. So, next on our agenda is public comments on agenda items. Public comments are encouraged and welcome at each of our regular board meetings during the period designated. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. For tonight's meeting, I've asked Suzanne Buck to be our timekeeper. She will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. As a reminder, public comments regarding personnel, students, or legal matters will not be heard by the board. So with that said, if you're interested in making a public comment on the agenda or on an agenda item, please raise your hand, either your Zoom hand or your hand within the room. Seeing none? Okay, then we can move forward. Though we won't be approving the minutes for the August 26th meeting, is there any questions, any discussion that anyone would have on that agenda item?
I want to
Chip.
compliment the secretary, these are terrific minutes. No, they really are.
They are.
really are. They capture the meeting. Those
Yeah.
of us that were here, it captures the meeting, and that's what the minutes are supposed to do. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
I rely very heavily on those minutes.
I just want to make note also that I misspelled Nava's last name, and I will make that
Okay,
correction. So
okay.
I just want to
Yeah,
apologize for that. I did notice that.
and we can word it with a correction, so we don't have to do a modification. Excellent. So if there's no other comments on the minutes, then I'm going to move to the ACSD bills. I'm going to let Chip do his report. We just won't approve them.
Okay. First is general fund, and these were read by Jason and myself on the 2nd of September. General fund of $1,488,985.49. Breaking out that very large number, $392,000, these are gross numbers, were to Bread Loaf as part of the Mary Hogan.
HVAC.
Yeah. $104,000 was to a company that's providing, what do you call the computers?
Chromebooks.
Chromebooks, okay, sorry, Chromebooks. And almost 600,000 was for healthcare costs, dental and Vermont Health, so, big number.
That's the encumbrance for the year, even though it gets, it's sort of.
Now, we still have to, it's
Yeah.
written in as a.
No, but that covers the entire year.
Yeah,
That's
it's just a lot of money that comes through, and it doesn't say that on them. Maybe it does, I read them online, but in any case. The next is a McGilton fund for $815. The next is an additional general fund expense for $4,230. And the last one is a payroll warrant for $907,214.60. I recommend that we pay the bills and we'll, I guess, approve them, although I'm sure they've already been paid. I hope so.
Yeah, so we'll take up the action at our next board meeting to actually do the official approval. Thank you. Is there any questions to the CHIP or the Finance Committee on the bills? Okay. Great, thank you. Next up, we have report of our student representatives. So they're both here this evening, so feel free.
I'll start. So for clubs, we have SCORE, Student Coalition of Human Rights. That is one that I participate in, and I know that that's starting up on Friday for their first meeting of the year. And then at that meeting, we're going to determine a day that we're going to have weekly meetings at. And then just continuing with the later start time, that seems to be going well. Either students come to school when their class starts, but a lot of students who just might even want to come to school earlier, they are taking advantage of the free breakfasts,
Nice.
which I think is really good. And then for sports, our football team had 2 consecutive wins over the past 2 weeks. And I think our girls soccer team won against Montpelier recently, and we have probably also had some other wins.
Yes. Thank you. And Sophia?
So just about our clubs, they're just currently inactive, but I'm a part of, or I'm on the board of Hope Happens Here, and we're hoping to get that up and running soon. We just had our picture day, and that was interesting. We definitely, I think a lot of people are going to get retaken, but that's the usual for us. We've had some negative feedback, mostly from upperclassmen, on the mandatory advisory and flex time. It's mostly that just we've heard it from teachers mostly, that just people aren't showing up to their advisory, or they just don't want to go. Just because it's a mandatory. A lot of people didn't go to advisory before this year, so it's really hard to make that change just drastically. Homecoming is coming up on September 27th. Our theme is Alice in Wonderland, if you haven't checked the Instagram. And lastly, our peer leaders are working really hard to prepare for Bread Loaf Day for the 9th graders, and that will be on the 17th. We're also working really hard with our 9th graders every time we go to their TAs to work on the banner competition. And that's where we make banners for their TAs, and we compete against, and the top 3 winners get breakfast made by Brooke Jetty.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Who are the judges for this?
It's the front office, I think.
Okay.
Sophia, when is the required advisory? Where does it fall on the school day?
It falls at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, right before the last block. I think that might be from what I've heard, that's kind of where some of the concern comes from. A lot of people have that fee block at the end of the day, so they feel like I'm in here for nothing, especially during the mandatory advisory, and especially if you're an upperclassman, when they do a lot of like get to know you activities, but we've been together for 2 years, so it already feels like, at least in my advisory, it feels pretty like tight knit, and so I know some people who are like, hey, like I could go home, or
Yeah. I particularly have friends that have one class in the morning because they've gotten all their credits for 3 years. And they have like a 2-hour class in the morning, and then they could go home for the rest of the day, but they have that mandatory advisory, so they stay for 2 more hours, and then go to advisory, and they have no points.
One other comment.
Yes,
Just
Mary Heather.
with respect to the timing of advisory, this has come up for a couple of kids who are serving as peer leaders and who are also in the Career Center and afternoon programs. So in order for them to participate in the leadership activities for the incoming class, that's usually held during advisory, and so they have to leave their program at the Career Center, go and do their peer leading, and so it's kind of a conflict as well. So it's not awesome for everybody.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions, additional questions that folks have for our student reps? Okay, thank you. Next up is the report of the superintendent.
We'll worry about taking action on personnel appointments when we can get together, but there are some important things of note. One is you'll start to see coaches and drama directors and whatnot in front of you, and even if they are having to have been done retroactively, I've just asked our HR folks just to add them so that they're there for you. That's not necessarily something that's come before you, but it's nice for you to know. We will get to the place where those who are on deck, are there. We also coded, they are now officially temporary employees, which is how they should have been coded, and so you'll see, that's your job, right, is to approve employee hires. We also are very excited that you will be having the opportunity to approve a Spanish teacher. So we will be fully staffed in Spanish, and you'll see that that's a 1.0, even though we had a 0.6 vacancy. So what we'll be having there is someone will be coming in as a 1.0, and the other professional will be moving to a 0.6. So there's a little bit of crossover just to make sure that we don't have any gaps, but that's how that's being handled and why it's a 1.0 instead of a 0.6. We did have a substantial difficulty hiring for a 0.6, so that may be something we will have to kind of revisit in the future, but that's what that looks like. And lastly, there are 2 paraeducator positions here that are filled with new folks who are joining our team, so that means we're down to 11 vacancies. so we're looking at it.
And Steve, do you have a question?
I'm assuming that Rodrigo is Elizabeth, somehow related to Elizabeth.
Correct.
Placencia, not Placencial.
Yeah.
I believe that L is extraneous.
I saw that,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, we'll make sure that that's fixed. Yeah. Yep, thank you. Otherwise, one other item I have for you is just a small one, is that you know that there was some construction done in Shoreham, so that now all of the students have an outside classroom, and there were new windows that are put in, and so we'd like to invite any board members who are interested in just taking a look at what it looks like now to meet. We're thinking probably 5:15 at Shoreham Elementary School, and we'll go ahead and walk through the building, and you can take a look at the new construction. That should give us enough time for then everybody to come back here for the 6:30 meeting on the 23rd.
So I was like, what
Get into
day?
that. Save the important things for last. Yep, so 5:15 on the 23rd, if you're available. We'll walk through, and LaShawn can also just show you a number of other kind of improvements, that she has worked with the facilities team to lead. Looks nice there. The other action item it's a short superintendent's report by action items, but probably not by length of time. And that I want to draw your attention to one of the classrooms in Addison Central's 184 classrooms. It is the only classroom which has 3 grades that are learning together. And you might remember way back in June when Courtney did a presentation that was around the superintendent's class size report requirements that talked about how a number of the buildings in Addison Central were grappling with the class size configurations and ways to put students together when there are dramatic changes in sizes of incoming classes. So Ripton is a special example in that they this year have 2 incoming kindergartners, you have 3 first graders, and then and then they have 8 second graders, and so on. So as the team in the spring, where I was transitioning in, a tangential part of the conversation was talking about, you know, how best to try to put a grade configuration together that was educationally sound and also adhered appropriately, you know, substantially to the class size policy. This particular classroom was a difficult conversation. There were many options looked at. One of the options looked at was having just kindergarten and first grade together, which at that time was 4 students. That was universally thought of as a bad idea by all educational professionals involved, mostly because of the developmental age of the students in particular, in that that's the age when you're really, you know, you're learning about what it means to be in school and sometimes to share and to, you know, to follow community norms and things like that. So having a classroom size as a rule that was that small was not something that was okay. Also, if you have, you know, when the stomach flu goes through, right now you have 1 student that's reporting in, so you've lost the sense of community pretty much altogether. No one thought that a K-1-2 was ideal either, because obviously that's 3 grades together. It's probably 9 developmental levels and 3 curricular levels in multiple subjects. So 3 literacy programs, 3 mathematics programs, 3 aspects of social and emotional learning. So, you know, in kindergarten, sometimes naps become a thing for some students, right? By the time you get to second grade, that doesn't feel, you know, like that's as needed. So really it's a very wide spectrum. The IB units could be crafted in such a way that it could bring kind of the learning together, but the complexity varies widely in terms of what students are able to do. So the decision after many hours of deliberation was to have the students learn in that K2 configuration, mostly because a K1 was not fathomable. Dr. Williams, I understand, posed the possibility to the professionals and Principal Cheresnik in the spring about the possibility of seeing, well, would the board be interested in moving some students, you know, to have that classroom be a 2-grade multi-year classroom, which is what we have many of across Addison Central. And the choice at that time was not to do that. I don't know necessarily what Dr. Williams' reasoning was, you know, as I say, that was kind of before my time. So I think as I came in June, where we were was that the teacher that has that classroom spent a great deal of time preparing for that kind of an assignment. It's probably the toughest assignment in the district, and we have instructional supports that are there to be helpful for her. And there is a paraeducator, a general ed paraeducator in Ripton, and person is assigned to the classroom as an extra set of hands to be able to help to try to ensure that the educational program across 3 grades could be delivered as well as possible. I don't think it's an understatement to think that this was not ideal in anyone's mind. And an understanding that the kids would all make progress. Would they make grade level progress? Well, we will hope that we will get as close to that as we can. So the school year ended, and then this one began, and we've been in place. This is our 10th day, and it has. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's been a daily conversation inside the school. There are a number of parents who are not accepting of this configuration. And it has become a significant distraction for the staff, both the teaching and the administrative staff, and it has become, in my judgment, an unworkable scenario. And I think that is nothing to do with the fabulous job that the teacher is doing or the work that the principal is putting in to try to make this work. It really, a situation like this, as tenuous as it is, needs everybody to be supportive. And when you don't have that support, its ability to be successful, it falls apart. And I think, in my judgment, that's where we are. I attended a PTO-like kind of meeting, the parent group was wonderful at Ripton. Tricia came along with me. It's the first of all that I'll be attending, throughout Addison Central. And Emily Blinstein was with me as well, just to talk about the beginning of the year and kind of folks' hopes and dreams, and sharing district work as well, meeting people, and the predominant conversation point was the dissatisfaction with this grade configuration. The solution that the parents suggest predominantly is indeed having the Ks and 1s together, which is not something that the administration on any level, including me, is interested in supporting. So here we are, and I'm bringing this to you because I don't think this is a situation that is going to get better without taking an action. I don't have any action within my power to take. The board has the ability to remove students and have them attend, say, Salisbury, should you choose to do something of that nature, but I don't have options to provide relief. And so I'm bringing that to you for your consideration and discussion in the event that you decide to take up the matter as a board. I'm happy to take questions or anything. That's really the introduction to that topic.
Okay, so Suzanne, was that your hand up or
Yeah.
no?
So my first question is, it seems hard to have a conversation without knowing an action, but I heard you say that, which we kind of knew, K-1-2 is going to be really difficult. Mm-hmm. Parents want a K-1, which is possibly 5 students on a good day where no one's sick. But then I believe I also heard you say an option would be that the board could discuss and then at some point make a motion to amend boundaries, mm-hmm. so that it would allow you to move some students to Salisbury.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, without making a motion to have this conversation, mm-hmm. if one was to allow students or have certain students move to Salisbury, if they might also have siblings, what might that mean for siblings? Just as a wondering, and I guess I'll leave it there because I don't know how to have a conversation without an action.
Is what you're getting at?
Do you want me to
Yeah, go ahead.
answer?
Yeah, that would be great.
So, So I think the best way to stabilize the situation is probably to provide a single grade experience for the second graders, which would mean moving the kindergartners and the first graders probably to Salisbury, neighboring school, for the school year. I know that the board is taking up C30 and D6, and therefore, it would be my recommendation you continue to do that. And this is a temporary relief to a specific situation. In my experience where I have seen that done, families are also afforded the opportunity to have their sibling move along as well, if that's their choice, so we would be providing transportation for those students, and there's no enrollment barrier for any of those possible circumstances based on Salisbury's class enrollment numbers.
Okay, and, Joanne, you had your hand up, and then, Ally.
Yeah, so I guess I just wanted to clarify, I wasn't able to attend that family meeting because I had a CPAC meeting to go to. Did you mention that this was a possibility to the parents in that, and how did they respond?
Yeah, so I did say to them that I hear their concern. I mean, they're right, right? I mean, it is very challenging and highly unlikely that all 3 grades will truly get what they need in this circumstance. So I was able to affirm their perspective, and I mentioned to them that I did not have the ability to provide relief in the circumstance, and that I would put it on the board agenda, and that it would be an action item in the event that the board chose to take an action. That way it's listed there and listed appropriately there. We talked as well about incoming kindergarten numbers for the next year, which are between 2 and 1, depending upon what happens with one particular family. I think that led us to a larger conversation about a little bit around the sustainability of the school. There were some folks that were more familiar with state politics and what that looked like, and a lot of discussion about just how important the school has been to the community and how hard it is to manage situations like this. And that's probably as far as we got.
And just a follow-up question there, so you would be supportive of amending the town resident policy for Ripton students to attend another school, but not for other students to attend Ripton?
I think the only thing I'm bringing to you tonight is a particular classroom situation that I'm deeply concerned about, that where I feel that the students' ability to have access to education that they need is compromised, and it's compromised. It's a situation that's very difficult to provide that, if at all possible, in the first place. I think everyone was very clear about that. But it's also compromised because it's not something that the majority of parents are voicing support for. And that is impacting the staff and administration's ability to attend to their responsibilities, which has a larger ripple effect. And so I'm not commenting on what direction the board should take at all at large. I'm more bringing this to you as a concern that I have for these specific kids at this specific time.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to remind us of, and it's on the agenda, is later under report of the chair, that we are going to talk about C30 and D6 and how we're going to move forward on that. And there's nothing that prohibits an outcome of that being boundaries. I think part of the situation we have here is the timing, because we've already started the school year, and we can't necessarily wait until D6 and C30 is resolved. Because that could take too long, and the kids' education is at jeopardy, right? And if something is to happen, whatever we decide, if they're to move, whatever, we need to do that sooner than later, is what we have to keep in our mind.
So you had
And Ellie?
Brian, Mary Heather and Jamie.
Okay.
So my thought was along the lines of what you had brought up was, do we need to necessarily move the students out of that school? Because I imagine there are other students in other classrooms that might be interested in attending that kindergarten and first grade class. And since we have class sizes at Salisbury as low as 6, I imagine we'd only need 1 or 2 students to make that a viable class. And I know we had so many, like Mary Hogan parents in the kindergarten, first grade concerned about their class sizes and some of their kids in those groups that we may have some ready volunteers in Middlebury wanting to go up there. Middlebury is actually much closer to Ripton than Salisbury. It's bordering. You know, there might be people just 2 miles down the road. So that was my thought there. And then wondering from you, Wendy, is the possibility of adding in a teacher to teach that kindergarten, first grade classroom. Should we follow that idea, something that's possible in short notice, or is that like a next school year we'd have to think about it?
Is it okay for me to respond?
Yes, please do.
So, you know, you're voicing other ideas that, right, have been talked about and kicked around. And I think where we've landed on those 2 issues are, I don't have another teacher that I can take from anywhere to put there, you know, even for a moment, right? Even in our current budget for the remainder of the year, I don't have one that I can remove without creating significant challenges where I would be removing that teacher. And the second point, you know, the current assignment of the 3rd grade teacher is a straight 3rd grade, and that is what she has prepared for. Adding the 2nd grade to her class right now changes her from a single grade to a multi-grade classroom, which is not something that she has had the chance to prepare for. So even if we were to get more students that are coming in for a say a K or 1, say, we would have to grapple with that challenge, which is not a small one. You know, asking a teacher to change, you know, that kind of an assignment. You can subtract something, but adding something like that, that I would say would be significantly problematic. Because we want to create conditions where teachers can do their best work. You know, that's what our students need.
Okay, Steve? I'm sorry, Brian?
You sure?
Yeah, oh gosh, I think so.
Okay, thank you. I understand the quandary that we're facing here. And I can understand maybe the move would facilitate what I would call education.
Yes.
But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking in terms, will it cause a mini mums where those students are not worked with so that if they move into another group, they're going to be able to work together. That was not done at mums, and it was chaos. And my concern is with the psychology of these kids that may be moved. How are they going to feel, and how are they going to deal with it? Because if they don't do it, if they don't feel good, your education is out. You know,
Yep, I mean, your point is well taken in that any change like this has to take those kinds of social and emotional considerations. You know, the parents of those students have to be able to integrate properly. And so, you know, I would be working with Principal Sears and Cheresnick, you know, to make sure that we're taking care of things so that, you know, if you are wanting to make this change, I would recommend that you're making that in a way that the superintendent, you know, sees as the appropriate operational timing, so that that's taken into consideration. And there may be some things that we can be doing in advance, you know, such as, you know, some ways to mix and get together, you know,
Sure.
a little bit before that. But obviously, you know, we're on the 10th day of school, so the sooner we're able to think about that, if that's the board's choice, then, you know, the more we can be supportive of those students and families.
thank you.
Mary Heather
Yes.
and then Jamie.
Yeah, Mary Heather?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it seems, obviously, these are sort of 2 separate conversations. There's the immediate sort of emergency matter of what to do about this situation in Ripton. which, and I can appreciate some of the ideas about like, oh, well, to open it up to volunteers, and the school year has started, and, you know, the idea of changing boundaries when a school year has started is a little bit bananas, a lot bananas. So I think that is sort of a conversation that can be a little more freely explored, I think, when we're talking about C30, in the policy committee or as a full board, when we're contemplating how things are gonna fall out for fiscal year 26, or, you know, academic 25-26. But for right now, we have this urgent situation that requires probably the least disruptive solution to the least number of families to enable the principal to do her job and the teacher to do their job and students to learn as soon as possible. So I think in our minds, I think we need to be really clear about that distinction. There's this immediate situation, and then there's the broader conversation about next year and maybe the next year and implications for following years, but I think these are two separate things. So,
Thank you.
Jamie.
Jamie?
Yeah, I you know, I see Mary Heather's point about these two conversations, and I had some of the same thoughts that Ellie shared as well. Did the current teacher in that class, is that person a person who has historically taught in second grade?
So she has historically taught K1, and she
I
actually
see.
had these students when in K1. So the
K1,
second graders,
right.
it's their third year that they will have been with her, and the first graders have been with her for 1 year already. She also
Okay.
has a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. She's probably one of the most highly skilled professionals we have on staff to handle this kind of an assignment.
That's great. And the parents, I wasn't sure if this is Joanna's question or not, but the parents of the K1 folks, do you think they are interested in moving to Salisbury?
I have not.
You didn't float that.
No, because that's not within my power to grant, and the first place to come in my process, we haven't been through this before, but, you know, is here. You know, I think the main objection that is advanced most often is from the second grade parents who are concerned that their you know, that their the education of that group will be sort of held back because
Right.
we're waiting for the others to kind of catch up,
Sure.
and they won't be able to advance in the way that's perfectly acceptable for parents to hope for. I mean, there's nothing being asked for here that isn't well within the realm of what any parent of any second grader across this district would be hoping for.
Right.
You know, so and some of the things that are natural strategies that a teacher in this circumstance would be employing, you know, such as giving some of the students time with Lexia, which is a supplemental, you know, phonetics, you know, kind of, it's an online learning tool, is challenging for some of the parents to see as a positive, because it feels like a second-rate educational opportunity because of the circumstance of the configuration, right? Like, well, we only need to do that because we have 3 grades and this is what's going on, and that's not okay. When, you know, in reality, that would probably be happening a little bit. You know, I've seen kids working with that, you know, as a supplemental strategy all across the district. But in this circumstance, it's an example of where that just is inflaming emotions to a high degree, a disruptively high degree. Yeah.
Okay.
Tricia?
A new station alert has arrived.
Thinking about the idea of Ripton students being sent to another school, if that were to be Salisbury, you said transportation would be provided.
Correct.
Does that require an adjustment to our current transportation
schedule, plan, whatever, and if we are sending kindergartners from Ripton to Salisbury, what does that bus time look like?
So, if this is a direction that the board wants me to explore, which, you know, our website gremlin, sort of oddly, right, you know,
Yeah.
is helpful here in some direction. If that is something that the board would like me to explore, then I would go ahead and reach out to those families and I would
Right.
determine, you know, what are the transportation needs, you know, just what does that all look like, and you know, I would have obviously a clear answer. I mean, we've done a little bit of analysis and it doesn't have an impact that is prohibitive. However, we obviously would wanna do everything we can to ensure that these children and families, you know, are more than accommodated, so that they are, the kids are really supported. You're only 5 once,
Yeah.
right? You're
Right.
only 6 once, and so I think we would wanna make sure that this goes well.
Is anyone else that hasn't spoken?
I do have a quick
Jason.
question.
Okay, sorry.
We mentioned Salisbury, but like, if I was a parent in Ripton and I worked in Middlebury, I might think that, you know, Mary Hill might be a better option. Is that gonna be an option? Can they just?
So, I mean, obviously, that's within the board's power. I think my, you know, original recommendation would be Salisbury, only because, you know, I think we would wanna, be sure to, provide transportation, and in choice arrangements, intra-district choice arrangements, typically, transportation is not provided. If someone is asking to go somewhere else, you know, then they're getting their student there and home on their own, and what we would wanna make sure to do is provide transportation, which we are able to do to Salisbury. So that's why it's in the initial thinking.
Is that something where the board, if we also said, okay, hypothetically, enable you to move students there, but give parents a choice if in fact they didn't have transportation to go, say, to Middlebury instead? I mean, would that,
You could direct me however you like.
okay.
Just to that point, there is a bus that already goes from Ripton to Middlebury. So the issue of transportation is already solved in that particular case.
You know, I think the important beginning of the conversation is to determine, if you are willing to take an action to move students. You know, I think that's the first place to start, and then, you know, if what you want to put into place is to move the students and have me work with the families in such a manner that the students are moved in a manner that does not cause hardship for the family, and puts together an appropriate transportation plan, I can do that, and that probably isn't something the board needs to direct, because it would be very, you know, individual based on where things are. That's one way that you could go about that.
Is, Laura, you haven't had a chance to speak, I don't know.
How many siblings are there in not kindergarten, first grade that are connected to kindergarten and first grade?
Yeah, I think I followed
know what
you.
you're
I
asking.
think I followed you, and I not very many.
Okay.
So it would not cause an avalanche or create a problem in another grade in a manner that now we've got to deal with that, so, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chip?
It just seems to me that as a board, we have to give the superintendent the greatest flexibility in this emergent situation. I just don't see it any other way. We can argue all the points about moving schools and doing all that, and that's obviously been a very difficult discussion over time, and we're gonna not be done with it for a while. However, this is a specific situation that's going to affect potentially 5 or 6 children, and you know, if we're all wanting those kids to have the best opportunity, then it requires a lot of different flexibilities on an emergent situation, not setting a precedent, be very clear about that. But I think we'd be crazy not to allow the superintendent to have to solve this issue. That's what our job was when we hired her, is to make these tough decisions at times. So,
And before I call on folks that haven't, is there anyone else that hasn't spoken?
Ellen, I think, is the only one that hasn't
Okay.
had a chance.
Okay, so then I will.
Can I say something?
Yes, you can.
I think, I take Chip's point and Mary Heather's, I mean, just to say out loud, this is gonna be, I assume it's gonna be heartbreaking. Like, just to think about my kids suddenly going to a new school and 10 days into the school year with all the anxiety and the concerns that I'm sure they've been processing and having leading up to this point. So I appreciate how hard of a decision this is, and I'm really feeling for the kids, as Brian said, and the families. I agree that this is a separate conversation from C30. I think it would be foolish and irresponsible for us not to seriously engage with C30. We have a lot of elementary school kids across 7 schools. There are some classes that are full to bursting, and there are some classes that are very, very small. And if we don't really engage with how we are providing the superintendent and our excellent administrators more flexibility, and families potentially more, certainly more preparation and more agency in how their kids are able to access a consistent educational experience across the district, then I think we're being really irresponsible. So appreciating that we're not tackling that tonight, but I think this is a crisis that begs the question of when and how quickly we can start to really engage with that work.
So, Ellie, and then Mary Heather.
My thought is something about the social emotional impact on these children, and I know that we can't really know this now, but I would hope that if we do end up moving these kids to a different school, that we really look into, like, are we going to let them stay at that school to continue their elementary education or not, and consider that, because I think that jerking these kids back and forth to different schools based on our enrollment numbers that year could be really traumatic for those kids in the long run.
Mary Heather.
I think that point underscores just the urgency of this broader conversation, because this is something that has happened and will continue to happen if the board doesn't address this issue head on. And I agree that, you know, we do have to have like a robust conversation about D6 and C30. But it all needs to be focused on our mission, and really focused on providing equitable classrooms to our students, high quality classrooms to our students, and that needs to be sustainable over time. We have to be able to provide that over the long run and not have to move boundaries to try to make that happen for some of our different environments. So however we discuss this in a larger issue, when we have this D6 and C30 conversation, we really need to be focused on that mission. I mean, nobody joins the board wanting to contemplate what we are having to contemplate. And I know prior board members who served with us understood that. Nobody. People from Weybridge and Ripton, who served on the board prior to this current board, understood that. It's a really hard conversation to have, but we have to have it. And I just hope that when we are contemplating the solutions, that we're really elevating our mission, and providing consistent and sustainable classrooms for our kids across the district over everything else. I just want to underscore that.
Joanna, and then Nava. Actually, I'm going to go with Nava first, because she hasn't spoken.
Well, like, I went to a very similar situation, sort of school when I was that age, and I just think it's, like, not to be, like, underestimated the impacts of, like, going from that very small environment. And for me, like, it was when I was in 6th grade, or 5th grade, and that was a much bigger, like, change that happened than going from kindergarten and 1st grade and switching schools. And I think that, like, this is way more of, like, a developmental age where that's, like, possible and you can more, like, blend in seamlessly like that, versus, like, the longer you wait, the harder it
Thank you. Joanna?
I just have concerns about this move not alleviating some of the real concerns. That this disruption, this is huge. I mean, this was like a real surprise to me that this was the solution that we have before us. I think it's a missed opportunity in so many ways. I think parents were looking for opportunities to be supportive. I know that the current third grade teacher has taught second and third grade for years, is really experienced in teaching that multi-age classroom, and having those the chances for the second graders to go into that classroom every now and then would have, I think, been really great for that I think it would have alleviated a lot of it. It doesn't solve the issue of the second graders having the same teacher for the third year in a row. That is, and what I'm hearing you saying is that it's the second grade parents that are the most concerned, and now asking for the K1 parents to be, I just think this is gonna come as a real surprise to people, and I don't know how supportive of that. I mean, I just don't think it's gonna be supported. It's, cause I think exactly what Ellie was saying is, as soon as those kids go to another school, we wanna make sure that they continue their experience in another school. So it's essentially saying that no grades, like that Ripton's done, like we're closing it. Cause there's no way we're gonna ask those kids to come back. So it doesn't alleviate a lot of concerns, and it's a huge surprise to me. And it does set a precedent.
Okay, Tricia?
First of all, Joanna, thanks for speaking up. I really appreciate having that voice and having your voice on the board. So I am curious, how many kids are in the third grade classroom?
7.
There's 7 in the third grade, and then there are 8 for second graders
Correct.
right now. Okay, got it. And I think Joanna has a really good point that this is supposed to be a time of discussion and coming up with ideas, and I think maybe we have fallen into a narrow lane as far as what the possible solution may be. So I think, other board members, if you have an idea, hearing about it would be great. But as far as, the third grade teacher taking pressure off of the K1-2 classroom, I don't know how much time or thought you've put into that. I'm assuming that has crossed your radar. But I also feel like it's important for our public dialogue that these ideas are expressed and explored and acknowledged. So I guess, Wendy, what would be the kind of struggles or downsides to combining into a 2-3 classroom?
Well, the primary downside would be the small group of K1s.
Yep.
That's a significant downside, particularly related to the developmental age of those students. The other downside is changing the assignment of the teacher at this stage. That's not a small thing. So that's a disruption, and now we're disrupting 15 kids, and that we're changing the second graders to be in a 2-3, and so they've gone from the oldest to the youngest, and we are changing 7 of the third graders as well. The other piece is that one of the other ideas that we have considered in numerous ways, I think has also been voiced by parents, which is that, during parts of the day, there could be times when the 2s and the 3s can work together, and they're already doing that relative to some of their arts, movement, and Spanish opportunities, or other kind of community opportunities that are coming along. The concern that has been voiced to me repeatedly, both from individual parents and in group settings, is that the core instruction, math and literacy and so on and so forth, is of primary concern. And so there is not a palatable way to shift groups of that with, you only have 3 teachers in the building. So, you have a 4, 5, and a 3, and a K1, 2. So there's not a palatable way to ensure that all of that instruction takes place in a way that is operationally manageable in a school with a staff of that size. I don't bring this to the board for consideration lightly, and I don't bring this to your consideration, without understanding that this is a no-win solution. It's not easy to change an attendance boundary 10 days into a school year, and it just appears to be unworkable the way that it is right now. And my concern for that is larger than my concern, in terms of moving, and any other operational situation, barring any that come out right now that we have thought of, we just can't seem to find something that feels like it's less of an impact.
Jamie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I was in the middle of like 20 thoughts, and I guess I asked a minute ago if the parents were happy about this idea, and I think the reason was because you start out by saying, well, the parental dissatisfaction with the current model is like one of the main things making it unworkable.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like if we are at all looking at moving kids as an option, and those parents or any of the parents would be similarly dissatisfied and upset, then that would pose a significant barrier to that option. And as well, in the same way, their dissatisfaction poses a problem now. Is that possible?
I think you're right in that, parents are an essential part of a student's education, right? That parent partnership is really important. I think, where there would be 2 kindergartners, joining an otherwise class, of 13 or 11, they'd be making 13, and then there are 3 first graders, right? That's a different dynamic, working with parents who are not accepting of a circumstance than when you have, one single class and the overwhelming number of parents of students in that single class are very dissatisfied, and every communication that appears to be coming is about how this is not working. Something else is needed and desired, and this isn't working. And I will tell you, there's an excellent professional in that class. She's very well prepared, and she is doing her level-headed best to put together an excellent educational opportunity under horrifically difficult circumstances.
Right,
and
right.
So that kind of dissatisfaction on top of that, when you have a parent population who doesn't believe that you're up to the task, even though they know you're wonderfully capable, doesn't believe maybe anybody would be up to the task. That is very distracting in your ability to do the already most difficult job in the district. And I think that's what brings it to this place. That's different than having parents that are dissatisfied and challenged, and there's no, I don't know how the kindergartner or first grade parents, how all of them would feel about that.
Right.
And I certainly can be in touch with them and talk with them about that, as we move forward, if that's your wish. But that's different when that's kind of a dispersed number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ellen, and then Mary Heather.
I'm trying to understand, because I think Jamie's question is a really good one, which is, and we've heard developmentally and from a curriculum standpoint, this is not ideal.
No.
But I think, to put it more bluntly, I'm trying to understand how much of what we're trying to solve for is parents' concerns which I hear you, are have maybe reached a point where the level of partnership that is necessary for any positive educational experience for a classroom is sort of beyond. And how much of it is about what can be achieved through curriculum and developmental work in the classroom? Because I do think that this sets a precedent. I also think that if it's about, I'm worried about two things. One is setting a precedent that if enough parents agitate, if that's what I'm hearing, then any number of things can be modified. And I'm also concerned that the parents in Ripton will receive the message that they've driven this. That something that they may end up being very dissatisfied with will be their fault. So I'm just saying that because I'm trying to understand, like, what are we solving for the most, and how a solution like moving these kids to Salisbury takes care of the most important problems that we're dealing with.
So the way I would be answering that is to say that this is a situation in which all of the professionals acknowledge that the parent concerns are valid. We all share them. The idea that we are actually going to provide an equitable educational opportunity for the Ks, the ones, the twos, in that 3 grade, it's not, it's right, I mean, I don't want to send the message that it can't happen, but the statistical probability of it is probably fairly low. You know, so I think the concern from the start was that, you know, by putting 3 grades, it is the only place in the district where that's done, together, was an inequitable practice in the beginning. I think the thought was, well, if this is where we are, because we don't feel we have a practice that is better, then this is what we will try. You know, in earlier days, in different circumstances, it's been done before in Addison Central, but I think times have changed, and I just I'm not sure that it's really something maybe any parents would be accepting of, no matter what school it was in now. You know, so I think that's the delta. That is what's changed, and you know, there might be many circumstances where parents don't appreciate, you know, which teacher their child's placed with, or which curriculum they're working with, or that kind of thing, and those are not normally, you know, the types of concerns that would make an operational shift. You know, certainly not of this nature at all. I think in this instance, because we know it was a precarious circumstance that would only work under certain circumstances, I'm coming to you out of my ethical obligation to say I don't believe it isn't working, and I don't believe I have a path forward to see that it will continue to work. And with the school as small as it is, I don't see a path where we are going to be able to make it work within the resources that the building has, or that I could possibly bring there. That's why we're here. It's quite an anomaly.
So, Brian had his hand up, and since Mary Heather, you've had it several times, I'm gonna give it to Brian
Are
and
you
then you.
sure it's me this time?
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I can understand Ellen's perhaps use of the word agitate. I would say, from my perspective, what they're doing is expressing their concern, and that's their job, believe it or not. They have, if the kids are not supported by their parents, and I assume the parents know more than the kids at this point, the kids are not gonna be well off education-wise. And it's the same thing if they're going to college. You give them information that they need, and you support them. So I agree. Sometimes people will agitate because they just don't like things, but there's no basis for it. In this case, I think everybody is concerned, and they're trying to deal with it.
I also just want to clarify that the discussion that we had on Thursday night at the parent meeting was very respectful. You know, this is not a circumstance in which you know, parents are demanding, you know, this, that, or the other thing. It's expressing true concern that educational progress cannot be equitably made across all 3 grades in that circumstance. It might not be said quite like that, but that's what I hear. And so, you know, this is not a circumstance where it's a sort of a gang up against something. And by the way, true appreciation for the skill and professionalism of the educator that is doing, you know, everything she can to provide, to execute her responsibilities. So that those messages were heard loud and clear in that sense.
Mary Heather.
I do want to just follow up and acknowledge both, well, Jamie and Brian and Ellen's points about the challenges to the families and kind of what are we solving for. And again, I just bring us back to that, you know, that mission at heart, right? Like we are solving for delivery of an excellent education. And I personally feel like if we're going to put these K-1 families in this situation and that if we can be flexible to consider, you know, or perhaps instruct Dr. Baker to feel out whether folks would be willing to, you know, would they be more supportive of a resolution if there was some choice as to where they went, recognizing that we might not be able to provide transportation, but that this is just for this one circumstance. This is not a decision that is going to be carried out, you know, from year to year. That conversation is happening with the D6 and the C30 conversation. That is not the conversation we're having right now. The conversation we're having right now is for this immediate concern in Ripton. And I agree that we have to be as sensitive as we can to the families impacted. This is heartbreaking. And it's also heartbreaking to the professionals in the building. Let's not forget that. I mean, we cannot expect them to try to deliver something to dissatisfy a public and have it go well and have that not eventually feel pretty toxic and untenable. And I think that's what the message that is being delivered by Dr. Baker is that there is not a path forward in this current track. And then the other thing I would say is that the difference between this situation right now, where we have a lot of parents who are concerned about, you know, being developmentally at a second grade level, but in a classroom with K1-2, is quite different than being upset that your kindergartner or first grader would need to move to another classroom where the educational environment will provide the curriculum and will provide the rigor that is expected. Right now we're dealing with a situation where we cannot guarantee that. And so, like Brian said, the complaint is legitimate, the agitation is completely warranted. But to move students, and again, if we can do it with the greatest level of sensitivity and flexibility that we can in this circumstance, I think we have, you know, the ability to offer all families the learning environment their children deserve. And I think that's what we need to focus on in this circumstance. Yes, there are larger questions and conversations that need to happen, but that's for another time.
So, okay, go ahead, Laura, and then I'll.
We've talked extensively about the possibility of moving kindergarten and first grade and leaving a second grade classroom in Ripton. Have we discussed moving just the kindergartners and leaving first and second grade at Ripton? Is that something that's come up as a possibility?
It certainly is a possibility. You know, I think if you direct me to reach out to the families, right? If this is something that you would like more information around, I can do that and I can come back with a recommendation that is informed by their perspectives, which I certainly didn't want to engage in prior to getting your permission to do so. You know, it's what we want is the solution that is going to stabilize the situation and also, you know, provide, you know, high quality education for all of those students. So I think the most that I would do, there's always what's the least you could do and what's the most you could do, what's the right thing. So the most thing that I would do is probably move the K in 1, and the least would be to move the kindergartners.
It seems like we're at a place where something needs to change, obviously, right?
That is my report to you.
And, you know, the question is, how do we do it in a way that puts the Band-Aid on the wound for now and lets us come together as a board and decide where we're going as a district.
Yeah. Steve?
So I will save most of my comments for the discussion of the policies later on. My commendation to Dr. Baker for examining a very tough situation and coming up with a viable solution. It may not be the best, or it may not be the most acceptable to many people, but it is a solution that does deal with this problem. That's the first thing I would like to say. The second thing I would like to say is many of the people who are examining this idea of moving kindergartners in the middle of the year and how gut-wrenching and difficult that is, we're not quite being those kinds of advocates when the Wellness and Learning Center was opened at Ripton and kindergartners were moved there in the middle of the year. So it has been done by this district. It can be done by this district in a sensitive and palatable way, and we should continue to look at that.
How do you know that we didn't feel this way last year,
Because
Steve?
no one raised any objections saying that why did you?
Was that brought before the board for our actions? I don't remember that discussion as a board.
So let's, point of order here.
Yeah,
We're
I thought I had the floor, but.
direct, point of order, I'm sorry.
Thank you. The second thing is that this is not a problem that we were blindsided by. We knew about this last year when this report was given to us, and the board chose not to do anything. And the third point is that this is whether this sets a precedent of whether we're giving up on Ripton and closing it. I don't think that's relevant to the discussion of what to do to help those 5 kids in K1. This will continue. This discussion has to continue. Ripton loses 11 students next year when their 5th graders go on to 6th grade. And we continue to defer this problem and defer this problem. If this is how we have to solve it now, we have put ourselves in this position. So
Let's kind of keep focused on the immediate issue that we have. So what I'd like to do, I've listened as we've all shared, and I guess my question to the board is there more information that we need in order to make the proper decision? So obviously we're not making a decision tonight. We're, you know, hopefully on the next board agenda, we'll be in a position, or I'd like us to be in a position where we take some sort of action, because we can't kick this can down the road. If this situation continues, we just don't know the ramifications that could happen because of it. And the kids are at stake, right? So what I'd like to hear, what information, we've identified several things like talking to the parents, that kind of thing. So I think it would make sense for us to take some time to identify those things that would be critical to have, and give Dr. Baker permission to pursue talking to parents, looking at transportation or other things. So what would be those things that folks have, and maybe we can go around the room and just like each individual, and I could start with, like, I'll start with Ellen, I think.
If you would like a little time to think about it.
Okay,
Can I jump in for one
yeah,
question?
sure.
Because I don't think, I'm not sure we actually need to take action because C30 in its current form allows for a student to transfer if there are significant educational circumstances, and I think this qualifies as a significant educational circumstance. So
That's typically at the request of the parent, it is
Okay.
not at the direction of the superintendent.
But the
So-
policy doesn't say it has to come from the parent. The policy says that a student can transfer if there are significant educational circumstances.
Isn't there a
So-
procedure that governs, that dictates how that policy?
There is, I think the difficulty would be discerning, which students to move to alleviate the circumstance, right? There are 13 of them altogether. If we assume they're all experiencing a challenge, not just those that have been vocal, then I don't have clarity as to how to go about that in any way that feels equitable or fair or in alignment with the policy guidance that's there.
Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we then start, would you, Joanna, be willing to start? You know, what kind?
I think we've named a lot of information already that Dr. Baker should gather.
Right, so at
Could
this
you-
point, we haven't directed her to do that, we've just talked about it. So what I'd like to do is have a list of things. These are the things that we, as a board, would like her to investigate.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a punch list
A
actually.
punch
for the
list.
minutes.
I have a point.
Okay, so, I was just gonna go around the, room, but if it's more comfortable, I'll just call on people as they raise their hands. Is that more comfortable?
Yep.
Okay, so Brian and then Ally.
Wendy, have the parents that would be involved, I guess in the two grades, have they gotten together in discussions between themselves? Or-
Some.
Some, okay. That would be my recommendation, is if you can get them together to talk and have them work out that, hey, you know, we don't like it necessarily, but this is the best thing that we can do for their education. And try to get that into them, to say, okay, yeah, so let's at least try it, to see how things would work out.
So what is the best, I'm not quite sure.
So I'm
What-
hearing you say that if it's possible to get a consensus, that's preferable.
Right, but I would like the parents to discuss this amongst themselves in a group. Not just from one school, but from the two classes that are involved, those parents get
Or the
together
three.
and talk.
Can you be specific? You're talking
Yeah.
about Salisbury parents and Ripton parents?
That's where the exchange is gonna be.
I think what's giving me a little bit of pause, Brian, is I'm hesitant to put a parent in a situation of representing the needs of their 5-year-old in a situation with someone else who,
Okay.
right, that might be
Yep.
difficult, so.
Challenging at least.
I'm trying to, I hear what's particularly important, and I'm thinking that whatever conversations I'm having, getting a sense as to the degree to which there is, this is gonna be a good match, if you will.
Sure.
And a supportive match is important, so that the students are not yet seeing another circumstance that's uncomfortable.
I'll definitely buy that.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Ally?
Yeah, my wonderings are around the classes at Salisbury and the kids coming in. I would want you to look into, like, are they on IEPs? Do they need one-on-one supports, those kind of things, or other special supports? And does Salisbury gonna need additional staff or resources to be able to support those students in their classrooms? And also any other siblings that would be coming. Because I know one of those other upper classes is mixed and already up over 20 students, and so that could be a problem if, you know, there's 3 more kids that go to that classroom too.
Okay, Chip,
I can
and
go
then
next, but
Ellen.
whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Go for
think it would be helpful just to know more, and I assume this is gonna be a point of discussion with the parents, Wendy, about why a configuration of 5 in a combined class is impossible or unfathomable, as you said it. To Ellie's point earlier about knowing that there's a grade at Salisbury that has 6 kids, but I think that's combined. And we've talked a lot about sort of the curriculum and developmental limitations or flaws in the current configuration, but I think similarly having discussion or explanation of why the 5 kids in K-1 and keeping those kids at Ripton would also feel like not progress, not a better solution at all.
It requires another teacher.
Well, it may or may not. I think one of the things that is a big difference from Salisbury, for example, that has a 5th grade of 6, is that the 5th graders are developmentally an entirely different stage, and they're able to access curriculum in a very different way. They're, the K1s are part of, a big part of what is woven through every aspect of curriculum at the kindergarten and 1st grade level is social and emotional development, right? Building a community, being part of a group, and determining how to do that, whether it's, you're the old adage, you're moving in a group from point A to point B, or you're sharing ideas in groups, you're waiting your turn, you're developing ideas together. And the widespread thought among educational professionals is that's too small, that is not a viable number at that age. So that's helpful, a little clarification.
Thank you. Chip?
Relative to what we would want her to gather, or the
Yes.
superintendent to gather, it's been discussed at length, all the stuff that we would want. I mean, whether it's parents, whether it's faculty there, everything, every permutation has been looked at. Many of us at this table are not educators, most of us have been parents, so we can feel for this situation. But I think we have to allow the superintendent to gather the information that she will need from all the sources that she has, which includes the parents, which includes even the group discussions between parents. I don't disagree with Brian on that. All of those kinds of things I think are absolutely necessary, and that I just don't feel that I have anything else to add other than what I added before, and that we should go from there.
Anyone else? Laura?
If Salisbury would be the alternative of choice, or if they would rather be at Mary Hogan or somewhere else.
Anything else, folks?
Said most of it. From bus routes to parents, to parental input, to social emotional learning and pedagogy for those kids. I mean, if you're thinking of moving, it's better to do it at the beginning of the school year rather than
Right.
partway
Right.
through, like halfway through it or 3/4 of the way through it, when those friendships are already starting to form strong bonds.
Yeah.
The classroom teacher impact too.
Good point, yeah. So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, what this board would like really to do is to empower Dr. Baker to really pursue these questions and any others that she might come up with, right, that would help make this decision, and to actually now approach the parents and talk to them. And of course, I'm sure other things will come up during that dialogue. Is everyone, did I summarize that okay?
Doing
Okay.
that and also talking with the teachers at Salisbury and whatnot, I mean, that becomes a public conversation, right?
Yes.
And so as long as we're all on the same page that that's the appropriate
Right.
next step, I'm very happy to engage in that.
Mary Heather?
Yeah, and I think just to follow up on Barb's summary, I think the idea would be for us as a board to have as specific of a motion that we could create to
Yes.
address this problem specifically as possible, and not have it be vague or
Right.
broad, kind of, wide sweeping kind of situation. I think we need to really zero on in this circumstance.
Right.
But I
Suzanne.
also think for our public, where we had said that tonight, because of the lack of worn documents online, that we were not taking any action. So this is just like a fact-finding
Yep,
mission.
it is.
We aren't asking
is.
for any hard facts, hardcore decisions made.
No.
Because we can't make those.
Right.
So it's giving you permission to go have some conversations and to do some
Right.
what ifs and some scenario finding, but
Right.
just so that people, whoever was on at the beginning heard us say we could not take any action, so I don't want them to think that we're underhandedly
No.
taking an action.
Yeah.
We're just giving some, we need more information to have this conversation.
And I think it's fair to say that the board wants to disrupt as few students as possible, or as few families as possible in this whole ordeal.
Yep. Dr. Baker, is there anything else that you need from us
No.
at this point?
No, I appreciate your partnership in trying to find a solution to a difficult situation, and I will gather and come back when we meet next with more information, and at that point, hopefully with a concrete recommendation that also builds into it the needs of the families and the students, now that I've been empowered to talk about it more broadly.
Right.
I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. How's everybody doing?
No further agenda items on the report of the superintendent.
Report of the chair. So the first item is class size and attendance boundaries. And we've started a little discussion on this as we were discussing the previous agenda item under report of the superintendent. At our most recent meeting, the executive committee, kind of discussed some path forward related to C30 and D6 in follow-up to the presentation on June 24th. And if you remember, in June 24th, we talked about possibilities of having the policy committee focus on this initially versus creating an ad hoc committee versus, something else potentially, right? Or at that meeting was having the facilities committee take it on, right? In light of the fact that right now the facilities committee, we've given them a charge, right? To focus on really that process one, right? And there's a meeting that's on the 18th, so I'm sure we'll be starting that. The committee, we talked about kind of the pros and cons, and what the committee would like to recommend for your consideration is that we would have the policy committee take these up as a priority, right? D6 and C30 and potentially maybe some other policy if they say, oh, this dovetails in here as well. And so as a committee, as an executive committee, what we would like to do is really have this be a priority work item for the policy committee to take on. I know this was on as an action here, but if in fact the board doesn't have an objection, it's under really the role of the chair to be able to direct policy, committee work. So we don't have to necessarily wait and actually have a vote on this. If you're amenable to that, if it's okay, if there's not if folks want to wait and have a vote on that, that's fine with me as well. But I would be willing to basically state at this point in time, based on the recommendation of the executive committee, that we just direct the policy committee to focus on D6, C30 as a top priority. It's my understanding that the committee at this point is meeting twice a month, right? To be able to kind of gear up for the potential of getting this work.
I'd like to put something on the record for 30.
Okay.
Before we go any further.
Sure, just a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so before we move, before I let Brian talk, how do folks feel about that? Is there any objection of me just basically directing the policy committee to take on
Barbara, I
this one?
think you either just have to say it or not. You either take it.
I'm trying to be diplomatic.
Nope.
Just say it.
You just have to do it.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
Jamie
Jamie.
is the chair, so.
Yeah.
I'll just say one thing, and that is that D4, which is about comparability, which we had this meeting about, we don't have to go into it now, but a couple of weeks ago, was pretty on this same tip. And, if we're gonna do a combo C30, D6 thing, then D4 is probably,
Something that needs to be included.
yeah, I mean, Matt had a whole good spiel on this, which we'll ask him to redo again for us probably.
Yeah.
And I think that those, if you're gonna do some directing, I just would encourage you to direct that one.
Okay. And that was kind of my intent, that if there was other policy work
Yeah.
that you thought was important, to include that, and I'm happy to specify D4 as well.
Okay.
Can I make my point?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
And then you can.
If C30 is gonna go off into a committee to be examined, then I would like the following to be put down in the notes. If pre-kindergarten is educationally beneficial for starting students' educational careers, if your answer to that is yes, if you come down to that second paragraph, there's something dramatically wrong with it, because one of the things that I've heard over and over and over and over and over again is equity. And this is not equity, this second paragraph. This is saying some schools will have pre-kindergarten, other schools will not have pre-kindergarten, and so my question is why? That's not equity. They should have the same opportunities. And then it says, if for some reason there's empty space, then the people who don't have pre-kindergarten can apply. No, no, that's wrong.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure. My question is more procedural about
Yeah.
how the policy committee usually gets directed and prioritized. Is it, are they self-direct normally, or is the executive committee?
We just make it up. No, I think, first of all, these numbers are always, C30 is on our agenda for tomorrow. So we were sort of understanding that people wanted that we should be doing this. But in the past, I don't remember too many people, I don't know, Suzanne, do you remember us being directed last year at all? I don't remember that, but.
In previous years, off and on, there's been a policy that
Yeah.
people have known that's coming from the state that's mandatory, that the board has said, hey, this is mandatory, this is gonna fly to the top, no matter what people think. But typically, the board policy committee has to do the mandatory policies first, and if there's a change from the state, then those rise to the
Okay.
top. And then it filters down through to recommended or
I guess the one other thing I'll say about this is that, as far as I know, VSBA doesn't have much guidance on this particular issue,
school residents.
the school residence thing. They're kind of like, that's not our, and I actually, just because I was putting it on the agenda, I checked with whatever the acronym for the National School Board Association is, and they're also like, we have nothing for you. And so, I think that a lot of our deliberation on this will probably be a lot of, we'll say what we did in our committee and thought about and discussed, and then you'll tell us what you, I don't know how it would work, but I'm saying often we have, go into a policy, a VSBA thing or something else to really go on, and right now the things I found just are pretty disparate. Some are really good, but they're not like what we usually use to make policy, and I imagine that this process will involve perhaps some sort of different process than we often do to advance policies, which is probably great, actually. So it's a good thing, but I'm just saying that out loud.
Mary Heather. And then
think,
Ellie, sorry, and then Steve.
Just in response to Jamie's comment about not having a lot of state or national guidance on this issue, I think it will basically involve a lot of research on what other districts have done.
Right.
In the
There is
state
that,
and
yeah.
here and perhaps
Yeah.
region. So so I think there's plenty of content to be to be dredged up.
Yeah.
But to Barb's question, I think, I mean, I don't have a problem with the board chair directing the committee to make certain work a priority. I think that's certainly well within the purview of the board chair's responsibilities. My request would just be that how it's worded is grounded in the mission
Yes.
of the board, and that the solution that we're seeking for revision of D6 and C30, and if necessary, D4, whatever policies kind of touch on this issue, is grounded in, making sure that what we're providing are excellent,
Right.
high quality learning environments,
Right.
blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
So that is clear, and that is the priority.
Yes, yeah. And I actually have this from the executive committee meeting, I copied it here, is grounding it in the district mission, which was actually what Dr. Baker emphasized in our meeting, to provide high quality, equitable, and varied learning environments that inspire a passion for learning and growth among our students. And she went on to say in our meeting, the hope would be for the board to agree on educational quality parameters that must be met to achieve this mission, and if those parameters can't be met, the board's policies provide a number of options for the superintendent to use to maintain the proper classroom environments.
A concrete example of that could be that you may say that there won't be any 3-grade classrooms. You know, that's no longer an option in order to make a minimum class size, right? As you work through those things, and I would certainly be supportive, as I think Jamie's alluding to, ensuring that this conversation purposely even seeks out, voices of teachers, voices of educators, voices of others, right? That spend far more time in these conversations every day, so I think that's probably important and a different approach.
And Ellie.
Yeah, so Mary Heather started with exactly what I was gonna say to Jamie, is that there are other districts in the area that have done alternative arrangements with their boundaries, and I think we should look closely at what they have done, both in Addison, County and, Rutland, but also like across the state.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if this discussion is where we, as appropriate, talk about it. However, since Brian brought it up, I am also deeply concerned about the pre-K situation and would like to speak more about that at some point.
As a board.
As a board, yeah.
We can arrange a presentation of that.
I think Steve.
Yep, I was gonna call on Steve next. I was gonna jot down Ellie's pre-K
Sure.
request.
I have spoken with a person who is going to be on the state board about the committee that they're doing. Dr. Baker said that we would probably get some guidance about class sizes and attendance boundaries, and that is true. That person said that they are looking at that. They are focused right now on the high schools, consolidating high schools and doing that. But they are going to look at this. They are gathering that data. They might be a good source even early in this process for how the state is moving in that direction. And the other thing that I would put in a plug for is the VSBA conference in October. That is a perfect opportunity to talk to people across other districts and across the state about how they're handling this. I am very curious as to what happened in Addison. When they closed that school rather abruptly, what changed? How did that all play out? Because I've not heard anything since. And that is an opportunity. Going to that conference is an opportunity to talk to all those people. So I'm hoping to go.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes. And I would say anybody else that would like to network around that, please come because there's a lot of people there.
Yeah. I know it's during the week and it's a hardship, so.
I just would love to offer a commendation for the policy committee. I've had the opportunity to work with them more so, you know, in the summer as we've gotten to know things, and they are a group that doesn't necessarily share the same perspective about what's going on, but they really work together, I think, phenomenally, around some really challenging issues that we've already worked our way through, to come to a resolution that was unexpected, and so I have high faith that they will do a good job with this, and you know, Courtney Cron, who's the Director of Teaching and Learning, and I will support that endeavor however is needed.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So, the only other, item that I had, was really pertaining to trying to do a little bit of streamlining of work required, because we did, lose our student services, person that was gonna fill that position. So Darcy right now is doing both student services as well as, you know, supporting the superintendent and the board, right? And at our executive committee meeting, one area that Dr. Baker brought up that could provide some relief and simplify things a little bit would be to not require the committee meetings to be recorded at this point. I mean, we could always do that again in the future if we wanted to. It would be one less step of trying to keep everything updated, and, you know, from what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is sometimes just sit down with Darcy. I used to do workflow studies, you know, and just kind of see everything that's involved in our current method, and see if we can come up with some ways to help streamline it, because it's really complicated, and plus she's doing this other job as well. So if there's no objection, at this point, I would say.
Not an objection, just a note that
Yeah.
as someone who's taken minutes in meetings
Yes.
and then had to leave or had to miss meetings
know.
and then had to watch them, just someone else should pick up the minutes job, is
Yes.
what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
the person taking minutes has to leave, let's make sure that as committees, we're assigning somebody else. If the person ordinarily takes minutes
Right.
isn't there, that somebody else do it.
Right.
And then I think
And
it's
I-
a totally reasonable.
And I get that totally, because when I was taking minutes for the facilities, I relied solely on those recordings to record the minutes, because that way I could participate in the meeting.
And I would say that it is I mean, certainly, you know, our staffing shortage is a challenge, but also it's an area where you are beyond the legal requirements. Which you could certainly still choose to be, and that's all right. The challenge is that the Zoom webinar does not always talk to the website easily. And so when it doesn't, it creates a lot of time and frustration to try to get them to talk together, and that is the challenge. Now, that said, you've got important work to do in the policy committee. Facilities committee has work that they're working their way through. It could be that it's particularly important for some committees to be recorded, and that's fine. I think it's on the agenda now, just to raise the issue to determine what your preference is at this point.
I do have a concern about us not doing it ongoing, because I feel like it not only is a useful resource, but it also kind of holds the people in the committees to a certain level of professionalism and accountability when they know that they're being recorded and that any of us are gonna go back and listen to what they had to say. And I wouldn't want to, I don't know, have a lower level of those standards than we have now in an ongoing, permanent fashion.
Jason?
I would love it if the recording to be available for at least board internal use, even if posting them on the website is a hardship or just a pain in the butt. If we could just have access to the recordings after the meetings just to help us, that would be huge.
And the way it's set up right now is it automatically starts the recording, and it could say in the archive where it is. And it is a public record, so if someone did want a copy, then they could request a copy of the of the recording. So
That
that-
would alleviate the hardship. It is
Yeah.
not the recording of it itself, that's fine. It's just,
Yeah.
it's the posting to the
Yeah.
website, that's the problem. Pushing it into Board Pack or, into archives is not a problem at all, so.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
might be.
So
a
that's maybe a good compromise.
next step.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep.
So that sounds good to me, and then that way it can automatically record, as it does today. Committees, can be fully, online if they want to, if you look at the new statute, right? So in that case, you would need to use Zoom anyway. So that sounds actually like a good solution to me. Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Next, moving forward, is report of the board. I do know, because, we can't take action on C9, but there is several policies that have been added for the first time. So what I'd like to do is, turn it over to Jamie at this point, if you wanna, say anything, or if in fact people have questions on these, policies that were in, your board pack materials.
Sure. C9, you saw it before. You sent it back to us because there was a question about the second paragraph, which reads, the revisions, goals, and blah, blah, blah. This policy will be developed in consultation with parents, students, a group of people, essentially. So I talked a little bit with Wendy about this. I checked with the VSBA about this, and there's the way it seems to be people, correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, but I think the idea is that this policy requires us to establish a committee made up of these exact kinds of people and more, and that those people would be responsible for helping to evaluate and possibly change and transform this policy. That does not stop us from adopting it now and then changing it, if that's what the board wants to do, or should we set about doing this first? In both cases, it has to come before a group of people. I got the feeling, Wendy, that you sort of wanted this policy guidance sooner than later, so I had it warned for tonight so we could talk about that, and it's, but we can't vote on it anyway. So what, in general, do you wanna say anything more? But I'm sort of two minds. I talked about this with her a lot, so I'm pointing to her. That I'm a little ambivalent as to the right way to proceed.
The only thing I would add is that it seems to be, do we try to reach out and get broad stakeholder involvement prior to adopting a policy, or do you adopt a policy, we establish ways to get those folks together, first begin by reviewing the policy, if there are recommended revisions, we'll bring that here, otherwise, much of what is stated seems to be related to implementation, so that the conversation from that group is really around the programs that are behind it and what that looks like. So either way, this reflects a statutory requirement, and so we'd like to get busy fulfilling it. And I'm happy to take it when you have a chance to have action as it is, if that's your preference, and then pull people together and begin by reviewing the policy. Or we can try to have the policy committee reach out in a different way.
Question, is there an urgency, like state requirements, so we've gotta get this on the books kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think kinda, but not really,
But
right?
we do have a policy.
We have this policy currently.
Right.
And ours is pretty good. And my memory is that we originally thought there was urgency, but then we later, because there was a deadline to adopt this policy.
Right.
Then it
Right.
turns out that ours was good enough to not
Gotcha.
blah, blah,
Right.
blah. See what I'm saying? So, but I think this current thing does include some things that aren't in the current version that are important.
Yep.
So that's why. So there's some stuff with the food, some stuff with outdoor recess, whatever.
Question?
Yes, Brian.
I assume we're talking about C9 at this
Yes, we
point?
are.
Yes, sorry.
Are we gonna have a more open conversation about this whole policy at some point, other than tonight?
We've already had
We
that.
already did, and
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
in
this
addition
is
to
like,
that.
yeah, this is, this has actually been on the agenda at
3 or
least
4
once.
times.
Yeah, at least once, I believe even more, where we've reviewed it, provided comments to the committee, and they've taken it back. So the intent tonight was not to do a detailed walkthrough of this policy.
No, the reason I asked, I had several things that I wanted to ask questions about.
Okay.
But if it's too late this evening, would it be possible for the next meeting?
I think now's
Yeah,
probably
I'd
the
say
best
if
time
you have
to do it.
questions,
Tell us what you
please.
got.
All right. Goals for health services. This is Roman numeral 2. They're talking about school health services manual, and I'd like to know where that is from. If we come down further.
Wait, where's that?
It's
from?
That's A.
2A?
2A.
Okay.
Okay.
It was highlighted in blue, Jamie.
Does
Right.
that make it a link?
I think it's a link.
Yes.
It's
That is a
hyperlink.
hyperlink to the,
State of Vermont Age Emergency Education.
okay, keep going, Brian. I'm
Okay,
trying to-
thank you. D, I'd like a clarification as to what that is actually telling me. In F, I find that to be a problematic. We're talking about this includes comprehensive sexual health education, and this has been before boards for the last 20 years. And I want to know whether parents have had any discussions with school people in terms of what should be done and what should be left for parents to do in this regard. Under counseling, psychological and social services, they're talking about, I think in A, referrals to outside agencies will be made as appropriate. And once again, where does it say after we have contacted the parents to make sure that that's what they would go for anyway? I don't see that, and I don't know whether it's left out on purpose or not. Roman numeral 4. I want to know what it means safe. And development by providing a safe, supportive learning environment. You know, what are these steps going to be that will make it safe? So those are a few. And then we have Roman numeral 6, employee wellness. It speaks of a comprehensive school employee wellness approach. I've never heard of it. I've never seen it. And I don't know anybody here on the board who has seen it. It'd be nice to know what that means. In 7, family engagement. I want to know what that word engagement means. School staff are committed to making families feel welcome, engaging families in a variety of meaningful ways, and sustaining family engagement. I don't know what that means. It's just one of those vague general terms that, it could mean almost anything. I want to know specifically what we're talking about here. So that's enough for tonight.
Don't save them, Brian. I mean, keep them coming.
Yeah.
So this is actually, this is good, thank you. Out of an abundance of caution, we warned this for tomorrow anyway. One, curious if people had comments, so this is good, and we can discuss it. If you have anything else, Brian, you might as well just tell us now, but.
All right.
I'll just say one thing is that, and I don't know the answers to all these questions, but some of them seem like they may be procedural, like engagement, I believe, has like a definition. Right, like has like a thing like, are you doing family engagement? Well, like, you know, and I'm not an expert on that or what that means exactly, but I bet there are people who are. And so I'm not sure this policy is going to spell the process by which that happens out, I think.
It shouldn't. It's not supposed to.
But if we need clarity on it, it can come somewhere.
Right, so a policy is then followed by a procedure. So,
In the adoption of this policy, there's a whole manual that the state made for how to adopt this policy, basically, and I think there's a procedural component. I have to go look at it, but.
right,
I also think it points to 16 administrative responsibilities. The first one is the superintendent or designee will convene a local wellness team that includes many of the stakeholders that you're talking about, Brian, and
Okay.
works through this and determines, I think, probably some of the very questions you're
Great.
asking.
right,
They're good questions.
Well,
you
I
know,
think the
so-
parents would thank you for that.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I guess that this is the heart of the problem. Like these questions that you're raising, Brian, are interesting. I don't know off the top, any of the answers, and I don't know that we will figure out the answers in a meeting. So, some of them are probably the job of this committee, which will involve
Yes.
other experts
Right.
and blah,
Yes.
blah,
Right.
which is the point of this policy. So,
Exactly.
what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Right.
I guess wondering if we should just do that, focus on doing that, which is in the policy, rather than our committee trying to answer, and these are very good questions, but trying to answer them, because I'm not sure we will be successful or even do a good job at it.
Jamie, I understand what you're saying, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
I also think that there could be some substantive costs associated with this policy implementation, and so I think this will be something that will be an updated conversation after we are able to come together and have a sense as to what we're actually talking about and how we're envisioning those things here, and exactly what the operational nature of the manual looks like based on where we are right now and some of those things. So I think this will be probably an ongoing report item as we're
Right.
finding those things out.
And just to recap what I think I heard, I think what I heard you say, Jamie, and please correct me if I heard you incorrectly, is to go forward with the policy and then adopt the policy and then form this team that will then put the meat on the bone, so to speak, and really understand what that is, because this enables that to happen, by passing the policy. And if then later there needs to be changes, then the policy committee could take that on. But procedure, this will never include the procedures, right? Or it never should include the procedure. Is that,
They're
did I?
already established in this manual, but nobody has seen the manual.
The manual's really linked.
It's
You have to go
hypertensive,
online
the
and
manual
just
is there, you can go find it if you go online.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah,
But it hasn't been analyzed, to your
Yeah.
point, Brian, and I
Yeah.
it's practicalities, and that's what I would be hoping this
Okay.
committee would help us to do. Yeah.
yeah, yes, Suzanne?
So the original wellness policy that the district has, that this one is in addition to replacing, however you wanna word it, was developed by a very large cross-reference of community members, health professionals, whatnot. They all came together and they wrote the initial policy.
In ACSD.
In ACSD, and so.
Right, that is why that sentence is there in the beginning.
So that being said, when you talked about the counseling, psychological, and social services, the district within its multi-tiered systems of services, it's actually multi-tiered systems of support, is a process by which students can move through a system and find out what they need. Parents are involved in that process. So if someone's gonna be
Well, that's nice to
referred to,
Yeah.
that's where it is. And then when it talks about the wellness, as part of the teacher's health policy, there is a whole wellness piece to it. And they have little competitions all year long on walking and hiking and doing all sorts of other things. And it's all about keeping teachers not only mentally fit, but
Okay.
everything. So there's a lot in there that maybe as board members we don't necessarily know, but it's there.
Now, I hope that if this is passed, and then it moves on to actions, that we'll have further discussions.
And you can go look at the current version of C9 as well, because we do have C9. That policy does exist. So that might be a good kind of place to start to see, well, what is in place in our district right now? Okay, thank you. And then the new policies.
Well, so just to tie this knot, you know, because it's on our agenda for tomorrow, we can discuss it and just, but do people have, like, what do people think about the order of operations of like advancing this policy again and saying, yes, we accept it, adopt, and then move forward with this committee? Or do we wanna convene the committee first and
No.
then?
No,
No.
policy first on the
Policy
committee.
first.
Okay,
Policy
Then
first.
committee.
Yep,
okay,
thank you.
okay. The next one, the newest one, the new one today is A5. A5 had no VSBA mirror. This policy basically talks about how we as board members interact with one another, how we conduct ourselves in public. It seemed pretty straightforward. I added this sentence in blue, which should not have quotes in it. I don't know why it has quotes in it, to be honest. It's not taken from somewhere, but so I will take those quotes out when it just stresses this first sentence: board members should not attempt to exercise authority or influence, which was something that came up at a board meeting a couple weeks ago, and then sort of goes a little bit to talk about the you know, directing our concerns to the superintendent, which is something that when you brought up at some point at another meeting. But other than that, I think we thought this policy was pretty good. Next was A30. There's a lot of red here on this, but that's just because
It's all red.
it's all red. There's a lot of it's formatting, to be honest, and but there is some and it's annoying because some of this red is not totally new text, but it came forward as red in Google Docs, and but basically it talks about the process by which policy gets developed on the board. There wasn't a real significant substantive change from how we currently do it. And so, again, we thought this was fairly straightforward with these. All the red is VSBA modification that updated this policy. I'll just keep going, and then the final one I think for tonight is.
There are two more.
There's
Two more. Oh yeah, right. E20. So this was kind of this is the second time you've seen this one actually. E20 is interesting. This determines how our school buildings get used by the public, or if at all. The way the policy is, as you can see, there is an or option, like you have the option to close your buildings off from the public, totally. I mean, not from kids, but from the public. And we decided that was not our policy. So we met with Pietro, and the important part to focus on here is the part that begins the school district recognizes, and then you see some purple and red there. So basically, we were advised to specify ways in which our buildings can be used so as to permit freedom of use, permit them being, viable, vibrant public spaces, but also not sort of political stomping grounds, I guess. And so this red and purple in that paragraph is Pietro's wording. If anyone has any, we did deliberate quite a long time about this, and we felt like we were pretty careful, and Pietro was like, here's what you have to say, so we just said that. Anyway, okay, so that's one, and then there's two more.
It was basically like 5 hours of meetings distilled into one sentence.
Yeah, essentially. F1, required travel reimbursement. This is just how we pay people for travel reimbursement. It's not, it just needed to be updated, so we wanna update it. And then finally, is that it? That's it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Any questions, on any of the policies that, Jamie, the policy committee just introduced for us to review? Yes, Jason.
E20, the 5-hour paragraph there, if you read it, it means like an organization cannot hold a meeting in a district building unless it's related to athletics, recreation, training, or government operations.
Yes,
That's correct.
that's correct.
Okay.
Unless it works, unless it is, related, to, right, the school as indicated below.
Our options were sort of either to make it available to anyone for any reason, or to be very specific about the groups that it could be available to and for what purposes. And Wendy very helpfully looked at how the schools are currently used, and all of that's captured in that list, but doesn't open the door to everything and everyone.
Thank you. Chip.
There was that incident actually in Virgins, which caused a lot of bad feelings in different ways, and I don't know what their policy said or whether in fact they had an open-ended type of thing, which then allowed them. This is sort of the same thing as we talked about the flag, okay? Back a few years ago, and it's a touchy issue because, you might want some groups to use it, but if you do that, how are you gonna keep groups that you don't wanna use it from using it?
Right.
And taking the public flack that comes from that, which is what happened in Virginia, from what I can see, so.
It's
I would much rather have it be limited by what the committee came up with.
The way it's written now, there was a brief moment of comic relief in this long process, which was to say that sort of extremist political organization cannot hold a meeting at a school, but they can play basketball.
Yes.
Yes.
They can hold a basketball game. We can't stop them from doing that, but they can do anything else.
Well, they can start a basketball league.
Sort of basketball
And
league,
then
yeah.
they can play basketball.
So anyway, that's where, and this policy is, to Chip's point, is exactly a response to the Virginia situation which you were referring to, and this policy was obviously combed through by the legal folks quite significantly.
Thank you.
So we feel this one's, pretty good.
Because actually this policy is new. The existing policy that all districts used was a VSBA one. When the stuff hit the fan, they took down the VSBA one and then reauthorized a new one.
You're right.
Yep.
So our current policy, just so everyone's aware, says that groups meeting our ACSD mission can use our building. And that is basically unconstitutional.
Does not pass.
So
Get
it
it
sounds
before.
great, and but it doesn't work. So that's why this policy came up.
Or this
Chip.
Supreme Court would find it unconstitutional.
Correct.
I look
That's an
back at
important
the
distinction.
days
Well put.
when the Home and Garden Show used to be in our gymnasium,
Yeah.
okay? Now the Home and Garden Show could have had vendors or had whatevers that did not meet some parts of whatever, it could be political and everything else, so in actual fact, the way this policy is written, that type of a situation wouldn't occur in this
Right.
building.
Right.
Which I think is okay.
Yeah.
Never thinking about it in the old days, but yet in fact, that was a trap if
Right.
it
Right.
could happen.
It is now, anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, Jamie, just a quick clarification where it says government training. Does that mean, that like the armed forces or something, when they come in and set up a table, they could still come in?
I think that's what I think, we were like the fire department, that's fire safety.
Right.
And so they can still do that.
The town
think-
And
meeting.
town meetings.
Town meeting
Town
is a big
meetings,
one.
right, yeah. Right.
I will also, just to put a fine point on it, the VSBA suggested policy was very open-ended. And the committee, with Wendy and Pietro's really helpful guidance, tried to find a solution that is constitutional but also not completely open to everything, so.
And not saying you can't do it at all.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a good compromise.
Any other
Questions to Jamie or the committee? Thank you. Next up is the communication and engagement.
Oh, yes, lovely. Hey, you guys. Just wanted to give you a heads up that I will be distributing a board member sign up for ACSD outreach tables with a major caveat that of the 9 schools in our district, 6 of them are having their back to school night this Thursday. So, hopefully a lot of you guys have Thursday night open.
Sorry, I'm in Springfield, Mass.
I am also in Springfield, Mass. Hey.
So what time do they usually start?
They
5:30 and
yeah,
7.
5:15, 6:30, 5:30.
Yeah.
Yep. That being said, I was able to attend the Ripton Elementary School night with PTO.
Parents'
Thank
night,
you.
yeah.
With Wendy.
Friends of Ripton.
And my understanding is that Wendy, you are continuing your tour of the schools in a similar fashion, and has very generously offered to create an opportunity in those events for the school board to have a presence. So even if we are not able to man all of these back to school nights, we still have a method for touching base with the schools.
And I will say, it was very well received to have Tricia at the meeting. You know, there were actually some you know, confusing elements of what the board's policies were, and so she was actually able to be of service in that respect. And I think, you know, she was able to really engage in some meaningful conversation, you know, and sort of understand more about what was so very valued by everyone about the Ripton School and kind of where they are and what they're facing. And the feedback that I've had from people who attended that meeting was that they very much appreciated having you there. So it may be a more viable way to connect with the community actually
Anyway,
than
yeah.
what you're working through.
Exactly. Trying to entice them over with candy. Hey, whatever
Well,
works.
the children come.
Yes. And
Ellie?
I have a question for Tricia about the tables. Are you you're asking for board members to come and sit at the table like throughout the duration of the time and kind of answer questions and stuff?
So we did this last year. So this is going to require a quick turnaround between Mary Heather and I to put together some packets for those of you who sign up for evenings. But yes, it was mainly being a friendly, welcoming, smiling face, and encouraging public to ask any questions of us that they might have. Right. With a reminder to us that we cannot speak with the voice of the board when we're outside of the
Right.
However, clarifying information that is already out there is absolutely within our purview.
So, like, for parents that are going to be there already, do we need to not sign up because we're going to be walking around the school and seeing the school as part of the thing, or would there be space for both?
Well, I think I would say put down your name and in parentheses also parent. If you're the only person who might be able to make an appearance that night, then I think having someone there for a little bit is better than not at all.
Is that okay with you, Wendy? Just to your earlier advice about like being parents and also school board members and wearing both hats, you think that that's like an okay mix on a night? Yeah.
I think, successful school districts have active board members. I mean, you're the only ones who can communicate with the community as fellow community members in that respect. So I think just establishing the board's interest in hearing, thoughts from the community about whatever they're thinking about, and just being available. I don't think anything bad can come of that. If there are grievances or gripes that you receive, how to manage those. But I just think it's good to be just available and communicate that the board is of service. Yeah. However, whatever form you do that in.
And from experience, having done it last year, it's not like you get people saying, "Oh wow, thank you for being here." You might get a question or two, but it's not been very taxing, really.
Yeah. I do agree with Wendy. I think actually attending with you these other events
I think
would
that's a
be-
great opportunity. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
Mary Heather.
I guess just to follow up on that, what we can do is add to the sign-up sheet and have two sort of boxes, one for PTO
Yep.
tour.
That's a great idea.
And another one just for back-to-school nights.
Yeah.
And populate it if you can. And what I'll do, this is what we did last year, we just created folders with materials, so like we basically put on tables pictures of the board members, we had pamphlets about what board service work is and the role of the board. We can request Emily's pocket ACSD strategic plan stuff.
That's a good idea.
Just a couple of other materials that folks can pick up, and like note cards for questions or whatever that people can bring back to the board. So even if you are there for a moment and you just set up the table, that might be helpful.
Right.
So I'll just plan to like create folders, and then leave them at district office and
Suzanne.
if you sign up.
So question, are all of our parent groups called like Friends of,
No.
Friends of? Because if they are PTO, I have been advised through legal counsel that unless you're a parent and you're a board member, you should not be present at those events, cause they are for parents and teachers only.
Which is why, so when I'm going, I'm an invited guest, and they know that I'm bringing friends, that are
Right.
coming along with me, similar to the way that we did the facilities tours,
Yep.
in that sense. So you sort of get in with me,
Yeah.
and they're accompanying me, as we're listening, because I don't have the context for many of these conversations, I'm just learning about the district in that way, and so it's very helpful, and I think somebody who was a member of the facilities team, was kind of a, shoe-in for, oh, right, well, that makes sense that you're here, along with that, and communication and engagement, is a committee that you have, so hearing, the ways that people are engaged or what they're communicating, what that looks like, seems like a very natural piece, so.
Yeah.
So in this instance, it seems
think
okay.
it's good.
Work in partnership.
Yep. Anything else, Tricia?
That was it for tonight.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we're on to public comment, and at this time it's for any comment, any topic. And again, we need to limit it to 3 minutes. And again, I would like to make a reminder that the purpose is not to discuss teachers, principals, personnel kinds of issues, right? So if there is anyone in the room or online that would like to make a public comment, you can raise your hand now and I'll bring you in. Okay, Mary?
Hi, Mary Slozar of Weybridge. Nice to see you all. Sorry I missed the earlier meeting this school year. First day of school, my kids took priority. Quickly, I have comments on a lot of things. You guys talked about a lot of important things tonight. One, just quickly, I wanted to mention on E20, and I'll try to bring this up with the policy committee tomorrow, but from my read of this, I wonder, as a community member, whether I would be allowed to host a CPAC meeting in this library, and whether our friends of Weybridge Elementary would be able to meet at Weybridge. It doesn't seem like it would fit, so maybe there needs to be a definition of recreation. Whether Weybridge could hold their town picnic at and other potlucks and things like that aren't quite, I don't know what recreation means, I guess. And CPAC certainly isn't recreation. We're doing important business. So I just wanted to raise that. That's not clear to me, and it seems like that would be a big concern. I also, related training, I feel like some of the things you're trying to avoid could fall under that. Like someone could train you how to deliver hate speech well, and maybe we're not doing what we're trying to do.
The other thing, I just wanted to highlight, I was really concerned, I did object, my objection doesn't matter, to the idea of not posting recordings of subcommittee meetings. Wendy might not have this background, but others in this room do, that we heard some very despicable comments from board members about other board members and other community members by listening to those meetings. I'm glad to hear that they'll still be recorded and available by request, but I feel like there could be other solutions. Like, if it's just hard to do that, maybe there's a Google Doc where the links get posted and that Google Doc just gets updated, but they're always available to the public without having to have extra hurdles. I think it's particularly important because there's not protocols on how minutes are taken. Some people write like 3-sentence summaries and other people take minutes of those meetings. The other thing I just wanted to mention, my reading of that policy, C9, and the involvement of community members and stakeholders is different than what you all agreed. To me, it says that community members will be involved in the revision and goals of the policy, also programs and procedures, which is.
Can I interrupt you
Sure.
for a minute, Mary? Barb, you had asked me earlier to be the timekeeper.
Yes.
Am I supposed to be the timekeeper
Yes, you are.
still?
I've got.
Yeah.
Because we're at 3 minutes.
Oh, I've got 2:30.
Okay.
But that's now. I've
So
been interrupted
that's all right.
for 30 seconds probably. Is it 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Yeah, so I put my timer.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to say that that's how I read the policy. So if that is the board's decision, you might need to make some action to change that wording if you're going to supersede it. And then the final things, I'm going to take an extra 15 seconds here from my clock, is on the issue about Ripton. First, I wanted to just really thank Wendy for bringing this, because it makes it, to this context, it makes it such a transparent conversation, which I think is much needed in our school district. But the main point, I have several, but I'll only make one, is that I think my sense from talking with community members in Ripton and hearing from them is that part of the problem is that parents didn't feel brought along in the decision-making process. And so I fear that if there's some imposition of another decision, it's not going to solve that problem. And I think, Nicole was principal at my child's school when she entered a 3-grade classroom. And I'm not saying that's ideal, but we all worked it out. We were all on board. It worked. We felt part of the process. And so I just think there could be a similar type of problem if there's just an imposition. So I think there's a big thing to learn about how we handle difficult decisions and involve parents along the way. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Anyone online?
I don't know who Eileen's phone is.
If so, raise your hand. And you're under attendees, right?
Under attendees?
Yep.
No hands.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for making a comment. Next, we have board reflection. If you remember, we started this at the last board meeting. And the thought at that time was that I would assign someone to give reflections on the meeting for like just a couple minutes. And Laura agreed to do that tonight.
Uh-oh. Oh my gosh, she's got her phone out.
Yeah.
Pulling up your VSBA assessments. Since I was 5 minutes late, I don't know if we started on time, but I'm going to assume that we did, because we usually are good about that.
Almost early.
I guess what I am really very happy about how we handled as a board a very difficult discussion that we had tonight. I think as a whole we were very respectful of each other, even though I know there are a lot of really strong opinions on both sides of the road, I guess, about what this means going forward, what, etc. So I think that we should be proud of ourselves as a board and as a community for wanting to do the right thing for our students and doing it in a respectful manner.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
and at this time, it's time for I can't say it, adjournment. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
thank you so much.
Can I have, what is the plan relative?